look at lane one or two, or are we good?
Well, the Opportunity Academy dress code is different than high school dress code. Is that normal?
What I understand, it's the same one as they had last year. So,
Okay.
The only comment I have is, you know, I just feel like I'd be ignoring my job as a board member if I didn't make a statement about it. The dress code that's in these, and I know we have bigger issues right now, and I didn't run for school board, so I can talk about dress code, but it has been an issue in our district. We had administrators come present a dress code to us that they said would be better for relationships between students and teachers, and said it would give teachers more time to focus on teaching instead of discipline.
So what I heard was the dress code that was presented would have been what's best for our kids. That's what I heard. And if we're kids first, then I think we should not have ignored our people at that point. So I feel like, you know, we're at a point now where we have to worry about reopening the schools, and I feel like there's probably going to be enough votes to approve this handbook with the dress code as presented. But again, I feel like it's a shame. We asked some students to do some work. We asked them to perform a task, to come up with a dress code that they thought was okay. They did it, they got it passed through their student council. The student council president came here and spoke in favor of it along with our administrators. And we just went straight in the face of that. And I just feel like it's kind of a slap in the face to the people that came here and presented that, to the folks that did that work, to the parents, to the former students that came and spoke up against the dress code that is still exactly the same as it always has been in this handbook that we're about to vote to approve. So I just have to say my piece. That's my job as a member of the board to speak for those voices. I think it's a shame that they're being ignored. So that's all I got to say about it.
I'll just add that I hope that we have time throughout the year to do some work in regards to the dress code, to find a middle ground, to work on our culture, especially at the high school, and to listen to some of the people that came here and gave testimony about their experience.
okay, anybody else?
Fred, I was looking up this dress code. I'm under Opportunity Academy. And it took me a little while to get here. It does not look like the dress code from last year. Am I seeing this correctly?
I really can't speak to that. I mean, I don't have last year's, I just asked him to pass on what his was.
What I'm seeing is the same thing that was proposed a few weeks ago.
And I apologize, I can't speak to that. I really can't. If you want to approve the other three, and I get with Tyler and we, Mr. Swally, and you put it on the agenda for next week, because we have, actually a meeting next week. If you'd like me to do that, I can do that.
Since he's not here for us to ask that question and let him answer, I feel like he should be able to speak on that, if you don't mind.
I agree. He will address it. I'll be honest with you, if I can speak. Sure. Yeah. I understand that the concern with this, and as Angela had said, it's about trying to build a culture that we really don't want to ignore this, but really our priority is to get schools open and open well. This isn't a back burner issue, but there are some issues that are getting school open is my most important issue right now. So when it comes to making sure and validating all of these policies are exactly like they were, I've not done it. I've just made some assumptions. And like in Mr. Swaley's defense, I just assumed that he understood that. And I'm sure he did, because I probably didn't correct him well enough as I did those other two principals. So it's not his problem, it's mine, so it's me. And I hope that we can have the boards involved in some of those discussions as it relates to creating those relationships with those student groups and parent groups, to where we can build this culture that we want to have for our kids and families. So I appreciate your comments. I'm not disregarding them, nor would I. But this is kind of where we are right now, and, I'd like to be able to move forward so that we can begin working with the teachers.
Yeah, when I make those comments, I'm not saying anything about your handling of this issue. I mean, I realized when your start date was July 1st, and this has been going on long before even last school year, so.
So, and I'm not offended by any of that, I just want to make sure that we're clear. It's all good.
Anything else? I'll take a motion.
I move to approve the 2020-21 student handbooks for Santa Fe 5-6 Center, which is a middle school and Newton High School.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? All right, approve BOE appointment to the NRC board.
You guys have a couple of applicants for that. I wouldn't put one applicant, but I think that I wouldn't propose his name. And so it'll be the one that you do hopefully accept. I think Mr. Truesdale, I thought about that one, so, I would suggest you approve Mr. Marler's name.
Say it again.
Mr. Marler.
Oh. Sounds good to me.
Make a motion.
I'm great.
I move to approve Tim Marver to the Newton Recreation Commission board effective immediately and to fulfill a term that ends June 2023.
Second. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Second. Okay. New business, approve 373 strategic plan for return to learn.
And I'm gonna take this off so that you guys can hear it. We have had a lot of people work over the course of the past week and a half. It's actually been a little bit longer than that, but honestly, these two teams have gotten together over the course of the last couple of weeks to put together we're gonna call it a strategic plan, because you have to understand, we're wanting the approval kind of the intention of the plan, because we know we may have to make some adjustments as we move along. We have two different teams, an operational team and an instructional team. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have those operational and instructional teams kind of go over what that plan is. You guys all have copies of that. You had a draft plan a couple of days ago, and the other one would have been placed in board docs tonight or this afternoon. There are several things that we'll kind of talk about kind of as they go through those plans. That'll essentially be some questions that you guys might have. And I've got some questions for you on how we should proceed. So I'm going to turn it over to, I think we had Jane going first. And Jane was going to talk about operations.
Good evening. I had the opportunity to be part of the operations committee last week. That was a directors, some administrators, and then we had 2 teachers and some community members as part of that. I want to also thank Jennifer and Mallory for joining our group when you could. It was nice to hear feedback from you. Our team went through the KSDE guidance that was presented the week before, and then we determined guidelines based off of that for an on-site, a hybrid, and a remote learning environment. So we focused mainly on safety, which included masks per the executive order by the governor, classrooms and instruction, transitions, facilities, extracurricular, co-curricular activities, food service, and transportation. So all those guidelines are throughout the document we shared with you. So I have Tanae Alfaro and Brian Becker here, and then myself, who can answer any questions you may have. If you want. So any questions from board members?
I don't necessarily know if I have questions, but more things I want to talk about, so I don't know if it's appropriate just to get started.
This is just an open session with this, folks. I want you to ask any questions you have, challenges.
Okay. Cool. So on the operations, when that, I wish you guys would have numbered the pages, but it says K through 12 masks for students and staff, except for several bullet points down, Muir County guidelines. Can you elaborate on that?
So the first section is directly from the executive order. So the K-12 mask down to the persons engaged in any lawful activity during which wearing a mask or other face covering is prohibited. We wanted to make sure we mirror the county guideline in case anything changed with that executive order. So we want to make sure that if the county comes in and does something different, that we also are taking that into effect. We kind of feel that this is a working document that's potentially going to change. I mean, we had things planned last Monday, that then the executive order came out on Tuesday, so we already had to make changes. So we just wanted to make sure that that was included in case those changes come along.
Do we know when the county's mask ordinance ends? Of the 11th of August?
August 11th. And the executive order, if I remember correctly, and Fred, you may know, August 11th or 10th is when it actually starts.
Starts on August the 10th, I believe, and runs until either the emergency declaration ends or is re-upped, or the governor would end it. I think that was the two pieces of that.
We got September 15th when that.
Correct.
Or the emergency declaration.
The emergency declaration.
And there's some, and so there's some stuff there too with the masks. When you read the guidance, document from KSDE, it said masks up to 5th and 6th grade, they shouldn't be required to wear them. Okay. Then when the executive order came out, it said K through 12 schools is what the mask order pertains to. In a session last week with superintendents, we were told that also deals with pre-K students. So we got some clarification that we need to address, because it's going to be tough enough with the K up. Okay, but getting those pre-K 3 and 4 kids to be wearing masks all the time, that's going to be a little bit more difficult for some of those students. So there's once again some clarification that we need to get. And that might depend upon some of the discussions we have tonight about, do we support the executive order, and how does that all work?
I would personally scratch out the mirror county guideline part, just because I don't want to be necessarily tied to what they decide, because they're making a decision for the whole county, which some of our county is very rural and might not need masks as much as our school district does. So I would rather have not be tied to them necessarily. Or if we were going to be tied to it, it would be something like we can't be less restrictive than the county guidelines, something like that. I don't necessarily want to follow their guidelines. I think that we should be responsible for the guidelines that we set for our district.
And part of that information will come from the Attorney General at some point when he issues an opinion that will answer a few questions, maybe leave us with more, I don't know. But there's still some little missing pieces that we're at the mercy of other information right now.
We've got conflicting information about if the executive order can be supported, has to be supported, or who can overturn it. So that's still up in the air.
Yeah, I'm not asking about the executive order. I'm specifically talking about the county guideline. I don't want to be tied to what their guidelines are.
And maybe we could look at possibly changing the wording of mirror to where, I think what you're trying to, and correct me if I'm wrong, what you're trying to relate is that we're working with county officials, and this is a group collaborative effort. So I think that point is valid, that it's not just us all the time. So I see what you're doing, and after hearing hours and hours of discussion about all this, you guys did an incredible job. Thank you so much. Amazing to listen to this. I do think it's important to have a piece in there about our county, because we do need to kind of see what they're doing. We have to take all of this into consideration.
So then what happens if there's no executive order and the county drops mask requirements? Then we're also going to drop the mask requirement?
No, then we make our own decision.
Okay,
If
that's
they
what
drop
I-
it, then.
That's
But
what
if they
I
have a
want
guideline in
too.
place, we will likely mirror their guideline. But if they have no guideline, then that leaves us to decide for ourselves.
Okay, so as long as that's the understanding, I just don't want to do exactly what the county is doing. I want to make sure that we're making the decision for our district.
I understand.
I don't feel like it's very clear.
I think the sentiment is there that we would all like some autonomy as a board to make decisions for our school district, for what's best for us. But kind of like what Mallory was saying, I think we're we're trying to, or maybe what the operations group is trying to portray is that we do want to collaborate with the county and the health department, that we're not just going rogue up here, you know, deciding what we want to do. So I hear what you're saying. It's kind of a funny wording, but.
The
I don't know how to
the
reverse
wording
it.
to me says whatever the county is doing, we're gonna do the same, we're gonna mirror that.
And I think, like James said, this is a working document, and we know, no matter how long we plan for this, every day we're going to be hit with a curveball, and we're gonna have to go on the fly sometimes. I think looking at this document in 4 days, you guys put this together, it is incredible, because each bullet point took a lot of work to get there. So the information that we have so far is amazing.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to discredit the work being done.
But it can, what I'm trying to say is that it can change, and I think I'm okay with changing some things. If we
Would you
don't.
want to say something like, consult with Harvey County regarding guidelines or something like that? Would that be less defining?
I think that would loosen it up a little bit for me.
So Angela, are you basically saying if they were to say no more masks, we would like to be able to say in this document that we aren't automatically saying no more masks as well?
Yeah.
Am I hearing you correctly?
Yeah, I think that the term I often hear is we won't have a rule that's less restrictive.
Less stringent or
Yeah,
something like that?
yeah, so if the county says mask, we're not gonna say no mask, but if they say no mask, then we have the opportunity to say pro mask. Sorry. People are gonna read this, and I think the words are very important.
All of those things ultimately would be a board decision rather than any group. You know, obviously taking into consideration all of this work, but ultimately these decisions will go to the board.
What other
I have
questions?
one quick question. Let me see. Oh, this technically might be under instructional, so I can wait.
Well, I had a question, and I don't know if it's under instructional or operations, but can you talk to us about what the expectation looks like for, all passing periods and lunch and hand washing, how that all is going to look or imagined to look?
It's coming.
Okay, we're not there yet.
Yeah, we talked a tad bit in here on transitions, and some of that is going to be based on each individual school and signage. So if you've been out to the high school, they've actually started putting arrows down the hallways and splitting it almost like a road, so one way goes one direction, the other. That's our goal, is to do that at every school to help. So just a little bit about that. We've also mentioned alternating, going through those transitions, so maybe alternating to go out to recess with classes so they're not all out in the hallway at the same time.
What about at the high school?
The high school,
The high school is a totally different beast. I mean,
I'm a special interest out
the reality is if we have even 750 of our students on site at the high school at one time, getting from class to class is going to be tricky to be able to social distance. We're gonna obviously be out in the hallways as a staff trying to help make that and monitor that. We're trying to limit our transition times. We're also limiting the number of classes that we have in a day. We're changing our schedule around to try to make some of those things happen. But just given the number of students that we have and the configuration and the size of our hallways, it's gonna be difficult, which is why the mask piece is gonna be very important in that.
And I understand the whole mask wearing, but, you know, today being out there in a meeting for just an hour and wearing a mask the whole time was difficult for me.
Yeah, we've
So
already
just thinking
had-
about, you know, going back, I mean, these kids are gonna be in masks for a majority of their time.
We've already had those conversations about how can we have oxygen breaks, you know, those kinds of things. How can we incorporate an opportunity for our kids to step outside and get a breath of fresh air for a little bit, you know, and so those are things that I know Caleb and some of our other staff are already brainstorming.
For the elementary levels, to help limit the transitions in the hallway, talking about for the majority of specials to be pushing into the classrooms. So instead of having the kids, because at any one given time, there can be 4 different classes in the hallway going to different places. So to limit that exposure, specials, with the exception of PE, would push it into the classrooms. We too have talked about, you know, even having a breathing area for, at recess that, where you will have places that they can spread out and take off their mask for a little bit, because I think it might have actually been Jennifer that had mentioned that day that, you know, as adults, we continue to mess, or, you know, I said that I was just gonna gain all my weight back, because I'll just keep eating, so we'll just have to, acknowledge that it's hard for us, so it'll definitely be hard for them too.
And what about before school at the elementary? I know some kids come for breakfast, or some kids get dropped off and they're in the gyms for a walking program or something like that.
Yeah, you didn't get to see my face, but it was like that. That's still a work in progress.
Okay.
We do recognize that we will not be able to have the whole building in the gym anymore. So discussing on how that might look, if that means they get their temperature taken and then they head to the classroom. I mean, that's just to limit, because we can't, like I said, have them. Plus, with the social distancing in the cafeteria, depending on how many kiddos are eating breakfast, we may need the gym to be able to spread out and probably do a picnic with the grab-and-go breakfast. For those
Well, with
kids.
this being a working document, some of these things will have to be looked at more in depth once we have the face.
And that really was
And
kind of
brainstorming with our
the
staff.
purpose of having this piece put together, was to have that broad scope of an overview of this is what it could look like, but then knowing that after the board makes your decisions, our staff are gonna be going into this deeper and deeper and trying to figure out all those little nuances of everything we have to do, so.
And some of those things came down to this group set kind of, some parameters, but even looking at elementary schools, some of them have wet, dry areas, some don't. So at that point, it's gonna be kind of a building decision of what space can we utilize in different ways that the other building may not, so we might not want that specifically in this document, but just at the building level, here's what you have to do, and then you have the freedom to work it out in your building, how it works for your kids and staff.
And that's probably the same with the hand washing every hour, just trying to coordinate how that's gonna work.
That's an example of how the changes with, the day before the executive order, we were just gonna follow what the guidance in the KSD document was. The day after, we had to go to hand washing every hour, temperature checks upon entry to the building and stuff. So we were following guidance one day that was accurate, and the next day it was not. When you look at that executive order guidance, another thing that's problematic, and it's not just in food service, but we have highlighted in food service there, where, maintaining that social distancing, where it says essentially inside the building, every place but in the classroom, it's not possible with full attendance. I mean, it just really isn't very possible to do that. So that's kind of, it's kind of one of those things, you almost have to look at almost alternate day attendance of some sort, if social distancing is, if we're required to do that in every setting except in the classroom.
And I'll say the elementary team, our admin team, is very strong, and we actually already have a meeting set up for tomorrow morning too. So we will work together to make sure that we align as much as possible, because I don't want to say everybody's going to their classrooms at my school, but at another school, they won't have kids in their classroom until 8 o'clock or whatever. So we'll continue to work together and make sure that we are as alike as possible, given like Walton doesn't have wet, dry areas. I mean, so there's going to be some
So,
pieces there.
kind of a big picture, on this document, these documents that we have, are they board policy? Is that what this is?
They're just gonna be our practice.
Or practice?
They're just
So,
our
if you all find that you've done something here, that you decide, this isn't gonna work, do they have the authority then to be able to tweak it, or do you have to approve it, or how does that
It
work?
won't be me approving it, it'll be us approving it at the administrative level, in terms of, the principals have done a great job, and directors of getting together, they spend most of Friday, working on, okay, how will this stuff work? And so they tweaked a few things, and that same thing is gonna happen when they start applying some instructional stuff to it. This will be a changing document.
Like I'm saying, they're all the best laid plans.
The one thing is that, at least in my opinion of what I'm hearing, this is a good plan, but when you guys get into it every day, we're not there every day. If you need to make a change, we don't wanna have to make you wait for a meeting where we change it. You do what you need to do to take care of the kids and staff.
And you have to understand, what Renee was saying is really important, we have to be as consistent district-wide with those things that we can do. And they still have to have some building autonomy as it relates to that stuff, but we have to have that consistency for teachers, for parents, so they know the mask policy over here is the same as it is over here, as it is over here. Those kinds of things. It's gonna be interesting.
So then will the board get an update on what is gonna get changed?
I don't plan to do it.
I know you all have a lot on your plate, but, you know, if you're gonna change things, we probably need to know what's being changed.
If it's a wholesale change, a big, in terms of the intention of what we're trying to do, you know, obviously we would. If it's saying we're gonna go left instead of right during this one thing, then
Okay.
they would just do that, if that makes any sense. What I don't wanna do, I don't wanna change the intent of something like, well, for example, temperature checks. If we decide that we're not going to do those, and one, we're not supposed to according to the executive order, you guys need to know that, you know, based upon a logistical issue or something like that. That's not a decision that I would make, or that these principals or directors would make. It's gonna be kind of a living document.
Right. Well, and I trust everybody that, you know, good intentions and, you know, all of that, and have done a heck of a job thus far, so,
It was very hard.
yeah, very, very hard.
Anything else for operations?
Yeah, so back on, the first page in operations, K-12 masks for students and staff except for while working in a room or office that is, and this is the part I really have a question about, in which all individuals present can maintain a 6-foot distance from other individuals with only infrequent or incidental moments of closer proximity. So I've seen a lot in the media that when you're in a room with another person and you can wear a mask, you should wear a mask just to help the spread. That social distancing and masking are complementary. It's not one or the other necessarily. And I asked Dr. Jennifer Kuntz, who emailed us all today, her opinion on that, and she said she 100% agreed with me that studies show a sneeze can travel 27 feet. Very long scientific response that I'm not gonna try to read. So I would like us to reconsider that part, because I think when you're in a room with somebody and you can wear a mask, you should wear a mask.
Is that
I think
language
that's-
in the executive order?
Yeah, this is copied directly from that.
Yeah, that's what the governor said.
So-
I'd like to leave it the same since the governor, that's in our executive order.
So we can't be less restrictive than the governor,
We could be more restrictive.
but we can be more restrictive.
I'd rather not.
Well, isn't that what the health department says too? Is, I think they have information out there, wear a mask unless social distancing can't. I mean, if you can social distance, then the mask isn't required.
Which,
They're complementary, so I think that when we can, we should.
Right.
And we should have that in our guidance if we really want to protect our kids and our teachers that are possibly going to be in the same rooms together. And I think a lot of times people can't really, it's hard to know what 6 feet is. Sometimes you might way overshoot, sometimes we might undershoot. If everyone's just wearing them, then we get used to them. It's not oh, I can take it off now, I can put it back on, you're touching it less. The president of the Harvey County Medical Society agrees with that point. I think it's something that we should consider adding. Or I guess it would just be removing that point.
Okay, let me just, does anybody else want to remove?
I just want one of those mats.
I was thinking the same thing.
Caitlin, look at that.
We've got more on order.
Right on.
But that Reddington is available if we have any questions.
No? Nobody else?
So, no on that one? On the technology point, I was just wondering, did you guys consider wiping down? Because I know when this first started, we wiped down these computers. Did we consider adding maybe once a day, they wipe down their computers if we're washing our hands? Your computers are pretty dirty too.
I think the technology is mostly addressing providing them for remote use.
Okay.
it was, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's certainly a consideration that we
Okay,
discussed.
yeah, it's just something I thought of when I saw the technology spot. 'cause-
We're gonna encourage the wiping down of things and the cleaning hands and sanitizing as much as we can. I mean,
Okay.
that's,
Yeah, I think maybe like a once or twice a day rule of wipe your keyboard So it's helped with, spread a lot.
And thankfully, we're 1-to-1, so that is a
Yeah.
huge advantage over some districts who aren't. That would be a nightmare.
Yeah, definitely.
Any other questions on operations?
Thank you, thank you, thank you,
Yes,
and you
thank
guys
you
are
all.
amazing.
I'm not.
Yeah, we'll get more.
Okay, sorry. This is just a lot. On the transportation limit, unnecessary / extra student transportation, no Santa Fe / Chisholm shuttle. Can you explain that a little bit?
So, I believe it was in 2010 where we split Santa Fe and Chisholm to 5, 6, 7, 8, where it used to be a 5, 6, 7, 8, or a 6, 7, 8, maybe a 6, 7, 8. So then, in 2010, we were afraid there might be some busing issues getting kids across town with that change and where they were going. So they started a shuttle. So if you live over in this direction of town, and I'm not going to probably say this 100% correctly, and you would have normally gone to Santa Fe to middle school, you're now going to Chisholm to middle school. So you can go be dropped off at Santa Fe, and there's a shuttle bus that will take you to Chisholm. We've decided that those buses, I've been told by the transportation director, are packed, and there's no way to follow the guidelines of assigned seats for contact tracing, cleaning. So for this period, we would like to see those go away, and then revisit that once we're able to open things back up.
And is that shuttle more just like a convenience thing?
Yes.
Or it's not like federally required?
No.
Okay, okay.
And
And is
then
that
as far as
true
the
for-
extra, oh, sorry.
No, that's okay, go ahead.
Well, we have done some convenience helping out. I have very few bus riders at my school, but most of them go to a daycare. So because they are close to the bus barn, it's been just a nice thing that we've been able to do, and I think that's part of, we really just gotta limit, I mean, if it's the 2.5 mile or district direct.
I was gonna ask the ELP kids that go from Santa Fe to Chisholm and then there's Chisholm to the high school, is that part of that too?
No, that will still have to occur.
That still has to
So,
occur.
okay, I was gonna say, part of what I think we'll talk about instructional is we're limiting movement from building to building as much as possible, and that's students and teachers.
Well, and those kids need to get to that next building for their learning.
But I don't think they will. I don't wanna speak
Okay,
definitely
that'll
for
come
them,
later.
but I think that we are going to try to make adaptations so there isn't the crossover to another building as much as possible. And I don't know if we can do that in every case, but that's the hope.
So then like at Chisholm, like after school or before school, we'll use after school, they get off of the bus, they all go to Chisholm and then get on another bus to go to their neighborhoods
Many,
to be
yes.
dropped off. Is
Yes.
that still occurring? Is that still gonna occur then?
I would assume so, that was my discussion.
Yeah,
Change.
that's a logistics, otherwise you'd have to have a bus for each, like at Chisholm, you'd have to have a bus for each.
You'd have to have a
area.
route bus for each route from each building, which is
But
not.
then they would
Thank you.
need to be cleaned before those other buses, get wiped down before those other kids get on those buses.
Correct.
So something in the works.
Yeah, that's part of, I mean, I think Sheila has already been developing those guidelines and those checklists for those drivers of
Okay. So that'd be
the
part of checklist
sanitizing
for
between
that.
getting kids on and off in different places. And so we were just trying to eliminate the extra routes that would be more of an issue, knowing that we were still gonna have these other issues to work
Okay.
through.
Under facilities, you have playground equipment for K through 4. Do you know if we need to be cleaning those?
The CDC guidance is that we do not need to clean that. The guidance is that kids should hand wash or sanitize before going out and then coming back in.
It's kind of a matter of priority, do you?
Clean the door handles or-
Not clean the inside, which one do you do?
And I think the operations piece of that from Chris Schaefer's viewpoint was we have sprayers that we use to spray down other surfaces. It would be very easy for them to do the same with that equipment if we needed to do that.
think there was some talk in there about by request only. What does, explain that a little bit?
That is to keep that 6-foot distance. So if a student does require a locker, the goal is going to be that all those students are socially distanced along the hall, so they're not all bunched up. Do you want to speak more?
Yeah,
on
and that actually kind of stems a little bit from the direction the high school was going already. Our plan for this upcoming school year was, rather than assigning every student a locker, allowing them to request one if they wanted one, because we have found, and this was very evident when we went back for the locker clean out in March, most of our students do not use their lockers. And so we're at a point where, through some capital outlay over the next few years, we need to do some locker replacements. And we're trying to kind of gauge the usage so that we don't have to spend extra money that's really not needed to be spent. So it kind of stemmed from that, but then it morphed into also, if kids want lockers, we're going to space them out so that we can keep the social distancing as much as possible.
White backpacks are going to be allowed now, and then they can just carry them.
Correct. High school students carry their backpacks. If you've ever walked into the high school and tried to pick up their backpack, it weighs 50, 60 pounds because they have every textbook in it. So.
Okay.
And that would be at all grade levels. So I know there's some elementary that have lockers as well,
So
so.
stand
at all.
okay.
Our goal was truly to try to make this as district-wide as possible so that it looked the same in every building.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Well, and even Cooper has lockers too. So.
Mhm.
On food service, you guys have lunch pickup for remote learning students. Did we think about breakfast as well, or is that logistically?
It is, it's probably just that we didn't say breakfast and lunch.
Okay, so it would include the option for
Yeah.
pickup for both?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I will,
And I don't know how you guys have done it here, where I was at before, if there was gonna be a breakfast, they would pick it up during lunch and we would grab it.
that would, I was just
Yeah,
gonna say.
Yeah.
that would be my
I think it
request.
would look very similar to the way our summer lunch program has worked, where it's not every single lunch or breakfast period, but a periodic
With
thing.
the potential of taking temperatures, the drop-off is gonna take a lot anyways of time. And so to be backed up with cars picking up breakfast, I think it would be safer, thinking of the little kids that walk to school, keep
So I
the
know,
least amount of cars.
I know people are probably watching this to hear what we're rolling out. So can you go into a little bit of detail about how we're gonna be taking temperatures and what they should expect for that?
Sure. We are going to meet with Karen Lehman, our nurse director, along with several of the building admins in the next few weeks to start looking at some of that logistically. Because we know we're in Kansas, we have bad weather, we have cold weather, so we don't want our students standing outside. So we're trying to work through where we could have them filter in through. I need to remove this for just a second, sorry. So we are, I'm not sure if you've approved it already this evening or not.
Not yet.
Not yet, okay. So I should just, so there's hopefully something we can do to scan those very quickly. So students would just come through, it would be red or green. Red is they're good to go. Vice versa, I said it the wrong way. Green is they're good to go. Red is they have a fever. Then we would have a another spot for them to go. I'm not saying this very well. So we're still kind of looking through. Yes, so this is what we're looking for. Looking into getting very quick. 2 seconds is all it's supposed to take. So hopefully that will go fairly quickly as we get students through. Like I said, we are working on what that looks like though. We need to limit doors in potentially, so maybe at the high school just 2 to 3 of their doors open, and then staffing. So there's a lot more detail that needs to go into this, and something we'll work on in the next week or 2.
And it's something you stand, can you scroll down a little bit for the pictures? You stand right in front of it?
Yeah, there's, and the picture can actually face the person, like the staff member, not the person that's walking up to it. And there's a little bar across the top is what's looking at your temperature. Am I right, David?
So basically, it's an infrared camera that shoots right at the forehead. There's also some neat features about it is that you can't see it here, but there's an outline of a silhouette of a body. So the student, wherever it is, goes up, they look into it, they line up with it, and it goes ahead and reads the temperature, and it's accurate within 1 degree. Another neat feature about it is that she mentioned the Kansas weather. It's also able to be calibrated, so if it's 104 degrees outside, we can calibrate it, and then it can go ahead and adjust and take that into consideration. Another part is that it can also tell if the person's wearing their mask or not, so it can be programmed to say, hey, put on your mask, which we think is a pretty cool feature. But in addition to that, I mean, I think it's something that is going, what I think you guys all need to remember is, it's just going to serve as the initial screening. In other words, if a student comes through and it blinks red because they have a high temperature, then they're gonna go ahead and move over to a more accurate reading, I guess I would say, or at least a confirmation reading that would take place after that. So this is just gonna try to hopefully get us through, like she said, about a second or two per student. We're gonna have multiples at each school so that they can get through as quickly as possible, but at least taking that initial screening, so.
There would be multiples at each school, sorry, I wanted to.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I
When
thought,
you consider the logistics of all of this, like at the high school, for example, there are several outbuildings, they're gonna have to handle the numbers out there, and the staff will have to be trained to do those kind of projects.
And my understanding is the process is that if they're scanned and they're above the threshold into red, they get sent to an isolation area and the nurse will double check and then decide if that student's at home or else.
Yeah, we're just, the logistical part of it, of how to filter that through is what we're still working on.
And that's just the thought process there is that, again, my brain is elementary level, but, that it can't be a drop and drive anymore, that you might have to wait if we have 6-foot markers or whatever, and it'll move pretty